46 years, 16,972 days to be exact. That's how long I've been living here on earth. But like the stories that we've heard today, my life changed on one day in particular. So I wanted to take you back to July 10th, 2019. It was a beautiful summer day. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, the breeze was breezing. It would be one of those perfect days. But it wasn't perfect. It couldn't be perfect because it was the day that we were burying my mother. Now, if you've ever lost someone close to you, you know that there's such a thing as before death and after death. And in the after they're gone, your own life shifts in ways that you could have never expected. You look around and things just look different. They feel different. And you discover that what you thought was so important really wasn't important at all. And what you let slip through your fingers is what you should have been holding on to the tightest. So I'm standing at my mother's grave, I'm looking down, and my mind is completely still. But in the weeks and months after her burial, memories started flooding in, and those memories turned into questions. Mom, how did you know Dad was the one? Mom, how come you never really hung out with your cousins when we were growing up? Mom, why did you go back to school and get that PhD when clearly you didn't need it for your career? Mom, that corn pudding, mine isn't the same. What was special about yours? Mom, how did you raise these 3 kids? Mom, how did you handle losing your mom? Mom, is it perimenopause? My hair, something's going on. Like, what's happening? Mom. All of these questions just started flooding in, and every time it would hit me that, oh my God, my mother is gone. She will never be able to answer any of these questions again. Just 3 years after losing my mom, my father passes, and a whole new set of memories and a whole new set of questions stacked on top of the ones that I was already carrying. Now, with both parents gone, I began to truly understand the reality of the African proverb that says, when an elder dies, a library burns. In less than 4 years, I had watched 2 of my most important libraries go up in flames, only to realize that I hadn't checked out nearly enough books. Now, in the after death, you start to reflect a lot. And I started to wonder, why didn't I ask these questions when I had the time? You know, when my parents got sick, we made sure that all of the financial inheritance things were in order. We're taught, write the will, get the trust, protect the house. We get together what we can count. But what about our cultural inheritance? Nobody told us to sit down and record the stories. Nobody taught us to ask the deeper questions. And so we just didn't. After talking with friends, I realized that I was not the only one dealing with this. This after-death longing for answers, it was not just a me problem, it was a we problem. Think about it. Is there anyone in your life that you wish you could ask more questions of? Is there anyone who's 6 feet in the ground? And if you could, you would go down there and excavate just one more answer. Now, with my father, I learned that it's not just death that robs us of these stories, because he was dealing with something called Lewy body dementia. And there are over 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's. What this means is that the person can physically still be here, but the stories are locked away on shelves that are inaccessible. So our society has all of these systems for passing down money, passing down property, But the stuff that I was missing, the stories, the knowledge, the family meaning, we have almost no systems for passing that down. No guidelines for preserving our cultural inheritance. Now, I am a cultural anthropologist, and so I travel the world, and when I go around, I look at different cultural phenomena. I want to see how these different ways, how these different societies do this thing called being human. And when I look around, I realize that not every society has such a flippant attitude when it comes to elder knowledge. I was in Senegal, and I was at a meeting about picking up trash. They were talking about cleaning up the neighborhood. Now, at this meeting, people would get up on the mic, and this lady right here would interrupt them. She would come and grab the mic and just, and I said, my God, I hate litter. I absolutely hate litter, but she must be fed up. She said, I am a granny, I'm not taking this anymore. So afterwards, I asked my friend, I said, who was that lady that kept interrupting like that? And why did they keep letting her do it? He smiled and he said, girl, those are the professional griots. They come and we bring them to our groups to tell us about the history of the speaker. They tell you about your mom, your grandma, your auntie, your uncle. They give you your heritage in that space. And I thought, oh my God, here we are at a meeting about trash. Not some fancy dinner, not a state event, but a meeting about trash. And even in that meeting, they saw value about family heritage. What does it look like to live in a society like that? So much so that they have whole industries and people get paid to record these stories. Now, I know some of you may say, Zarinah, I don't want to know all the details about my family. Some of that stuff, I want it to be buried forever. I would cringe if somebody got up there telling everybody about my family. But what if I told you that even knowing the hard stuff can put you at an advantage? So Emory University, they did a study called Do You Know? And they asked these children random questions about their identity. Things like, do you know where your grandparents met? Random things like this. And what they found is that the kids who knew the most, those kids had higher levels of self-esteem. They were more resilient. They had faster bounce-back skills. And I've seen this up close in my work now with helping people to record their stories. I'm going to tell you about a dude. We're going to call him Marcus, all right? So Marcus was interviewing his dad. And his dad was one who was kind of seen as avoidant and a little bit standoffish. Whenever things got tough, he was nowhere to be found. Now, during the interview, Marcus discovered that his grandfather, a man he had never met, was actually an abusive, angry man. So much so that when he drank, everybody in the house ran to take cover. That was the world that Marcus had grown up in. And so when things got tough and Marcus's dad would leave, it wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he spent his entire life terrified of turning into his father. Do you think that Marcus, now understanding this, gives him a different view of his father? He no longer saw him as some avoidant coward. He saw him as the protector that he was truly trying to be. When you know where you come from, you move differently. And that's on the individual level. But then let's look on a society level, because when you have this knowledge as a society, you are stronger as a nation. So I was invited to go to Turkey on a delegation trip, and they took us to this manuscript restoration facility. Basically, it's a book hospital. So they were taking these ancient texts and they were restoring them with the level of care that you might imagine the Louvre using on some $100 million painting. They were meticulous. They were patient. Every page mattered. Every letter mattered. Now, Turkey is an ancient society, thousands of years old, right? And what they know is that you cannot let your libraries decay. What you protect now, today, gives your nation a place to go from. Now, we see the same thing in China, the same intentionality in Japan, the same thing along the Silk Road. All of these old societies invest in preserving their knowledge, all the way down to the family level. So the real question becomes then, why are we so focused on protecting what can be replaced while neglecting what cannot? The cars we love, they depreciate the moment you drive them off the lot. The money we're working so hard to protect and pass down, financial planners will tell you that inherited wealth is generally gone in just 3 years. Not 3 generations, 3 years. But the stories, the wisdom, the lived experiences, the lessons learned the hard way, those don't lose value. They only appreciate with time. And you don't have to be a celebrity for your story to have value. Now, when I was in DC, I was visiting the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And I only had about an hour. The place is huge. You cannot do it justice in an hour. So I decided that I was going to run around and I was going to snap pictures of every personal journal or autobiography or firsthand account that I could find. And I came across this one here. This is the autobiography of a man by the name of Omar ibn Said. Omar ibn Said was taken from Africa in the 1800s, brought to the United States, enslaved, put into a predicament that none of us would ever want to be in. Now, he wrote his autobiography in Arabic, a language that no one else around him knew. He didn't write it to come and think that one day it would be in the museum, let alone a national museum. He wrote it because he had to put down the things that he had experienced. Now, if he had not, we would not know about that period of time through firsthand account. And so what we discover now was based off of his courage and his intentionality back then. The elders around you are not just old people waiting to fade away. They are one-of-a-kind additions of documents that exist nowhere else on earth. So we must treat them as the walking libraries that they are. And we must use the same urgency that we use to protect our financial wealth to protect their stories. Now, if you still have parents or elders in your life, the window is open right now. You can choose to walk through. Because when you walk through, you may be surprised at what you find. I'm going to tell you about Erica real quick. So Erica was very interesting to me because growing up, she and her immediate family all lived in the Midwest, all right? All of her extended family, though, they lived down in Florida. Now, it wasn't a big deal. It just was what it was. But during the interview with her grandmother, Erica learned that, in fact, it was a big deal after all. Because 50 years earlier, her grandmother had discovered a family secret that knocked her to her core. So much so that she packed up her 4 kids, moved across the country to a place where she had no family, no friends, no foundation at all. She built up a new life from scratch. Now, Erica's whole existence goes back to her grandmother making that decision. And she had no clue that it had even come about. Now, you would think that maybe Erica doesn't talk to her grandmother that much, but they were like best friends. They ate together, they cooked together, they worshiped together. Sometimes the stories that we're missing can be right beside us, but you have to go and excavate them. So here's what I want you all to do this week. I want you to sit with a parent or an elder, maybe a neighbor, a family member, or a mentor, and I want you to ask them one simple question. What's something you learned the hard way? And when you ask, just listen. Don't check your phone, don't scroll Instagram, don't rush to offer advice or try to redirect them because you think they're going off on some tangent. Just listen. Because when you sit with an elder, you're literally checking out a book from a library that won't always be open. And what you find sometimes is not just context or facts, it can be missing pieces of your own story. So I want you to ask the questions, record the stories, and tell your own, because one day you will be an elder. And the question is not just going to be how much money you left in your bank account. It's going to be, are the stories, your wisdom, your lived experiences, the lessons that you learned the hard way, are they there on the shelves for those to find behind you? Or did you allow your library to burn and be buried with you? The answer depends on what you decide to do today, because none of us are promised tomorrow. Thank you.